TikTok is saving the gaming industry as we speak, but also kind of ruining it at the same time. So let me explain. Within the past decade or so, a lot of people would say that over the years, gaming has slowly been on a decline, potentially even being ass. And I can't even lie, in a lot of ways I would completely agree with that because they just weren't fun anymore. However, I've noticed something strange within the past year or so. It seems like there's been a new trend within modern gaming throughout the past year or so that is helping to solve so many of the problems and issues that people hate about modern gaming. And I think a lot of that is low-key thanks to TikTok. And no, this video is not sponsored by China. Now, I think that most of us could agree that TikTok is kind of a shithole and contributes very little good to society. I mean, just to mention a few bad things about it. Well, first we got brain rot. Brain rot's not that good. It's kind of hard to describe what it is without showing you, but I mean, I can't really imagine it having a good impact on people. Next up, we got addiction. Now, addiction is a strong word, but I think people have these moments where they're just mindlessly scrolling through TikTok or whatever else it is. And then before you know it, you check the time and you realize you've been rotting in your bed scrolling for 3 hours. And then the last thing that comes off the dome is probably overstimulation. Now, this is probably one of the biggest problems, and 1000% is affecting kids and teenagers, especially the younger they get. I mean, these TikToks where they got some video over some Subway Surfers gameplay is actually sad that they need to do that just to get people's attention. And I think it just makes people bored of everything. So yeah, you might be wondering, how could a platform as shitty as TikTok have any kind of positive impact on an already shitty gaming industry? Even though modern gaming has had a lot of bad issues with it, I feel like TikTok has been helping the gaming industry take a turn recently. So as y'all probably know, there's been a recent rise in popular indie games. Now, it's not like we've never seen popular indie games before. There's been games like Stardew Valley, Hollow Knight, and Undertale, just to name a few, but I don't think there's been a whole lot of indie or AAA title games that have fully utilized the potential of content creation, especially with TikTok. That is, until now. Recently, we've seen games like Lethal Company, Only Up, Buckshot Roulette, Power World, and just some of those indie games that have come up within the past year or so absolutely blow up in popularity. And I honestly don't think it would have been possible without TikTok. Now, the one thing that a lot of these newer games have in common, and that has kind of been a recent trend, is that many of these games are built specifically to cater towards content creators. Lethal Company is a perfect example of this because the game exploded for that exact reason. As a content creator, this is like the perfect game because it mixes horror and comedic aspects, which is like god tier entertainment. I mean, the amount of potential for thousands of funny clips to get while playing this game is actually insane, which is why so many creators rushed to make content about this game when it came out, because it's good content to make as a creator and also entertaining for the viewers to watch. And on top of that, when you actually play the game, it's not just all look, it's actually a fire game. Keep in mind, this game was built by one person, a furry, whose previous game dev experience was on Roblox. So the fact that this guy can create a game that competes with AAA titles and is one of the most high earning games of that year on Steam is actually wild. I mean, I'm pretty sure even outsold Call of Duty on Steam. The same thing could be said about the other games too, like with Power World, for example, because I'm pretty sure it was developed by just a couple people and it ended up earning like hundreds of millions of dollars. Buckshot Roulette is yet another perfect example. I saw this game all the time scrolling through TikTok, whether it was like a clip or like a TikTok live. There was so much content being made on this game, and because of that, this game was able to succeed. And all it was is like a little itch.io game at first too. As far as recent examples to show that this trend is still carrying on, there was this parkour game that got popular all over TikTok, which is like just aesthetically cool to look at. There's another game that recently came out called Chain Together, which is like Only Up, but you're chained together with your friends. So if one person messes up, you lose everything. I mean, come on, that's like perfect for content.
Lock in. Lock the fuck in.
And then there's even another game coming out soon, which was revealed at the Xbox showcase thing. And this one's a co-op prison escape game, and I can literally see the future, and this game is going to go crazy on TikTok if it pops off. There's tons of other examples, but yeah, the fact that these games are simply built to cater towards content creation is basically just free promotion for them because it's likely to do good for the creators, meaning they will make videos and get more views on it, and it just promotes the game overall, which in a lot of cases is really good that these indie games are being promoted. And let's be real, most new games we see nowadays, we usually see it first on TikTok or Shorts or whatever it is. I think this is great though, because this new wave of indie games that blow up from TikTok kind of create more of a balance and give more variety in the gaming space. For a while, it seemed like we didn't have that many options for modern games that weren't soulless AAA titles, but it's been nice that recently we have had indie titles that are able to be up there with some of the bigger modern games. Not to say that indie games are better than big titles, but it seems like they do usually tend to have more passion put into them, which shows very clearly a lot of the time. And also, a lot of these indie devs are like actual players and not just like big companies who control everything. Also, another good thing about TikTok is that it usually only promotes content that people show interest in. So what this means for gaming is that just because you have a big AAA game, it doesn't mean that people are automatically going to find it interesting. It's simply just whatever people find more interesting is usually what gets pushed more on the platform. So it gives all games a fair chance to catch a large audience, whether they're indie or not. Now, whenever you play these games, yeah, usually they're not the most packed with content and features, but a lot of times they can be pretty fun and usually feel finished at launch. And I mean, that's because they have to be. So this solves the first problem I mentioned earlier about how a lot of modern games usually release unfinished. With a lot of these indie games though, they can't really afford to have an unfinished, unenjoyable game, or else no one will play them or even know about it probably. With a lot of these bigger titles though, they have the ability to do pre-orders and put a whole lot of promotion into their game, so that way they can get people to buy the game before it even launches, which is something that indie games can't really do. The fact that TikTok is able to help these indie games get off the ground though is something I think is really good for gaming as a whole. This whole thing definitely contributes to more modern games feeling finished and complete on launch though. Another good thing about these games blowing up from TikTok is that generally most indie games are less greedy. Yeah, sometimes they aren't free and you might have to spend a couple bucks on the game, but at least after that you generally aren't blown up with microtransactions, battle passes, overpriced cosmetics, or whatever else it is. It's also a good thing because it shows that you can outsell even AAA games without having to cram your games with all these annoying microtransactions. And I feel like it sets a new example in the gaming industry, similar to how people realize that you don't have to charge 60 bucks for a game to make money off of it. I mean, that's why the whole free-to-play model is a huge thing right now. Now I know I've talked a lot about indie games specifically, but as for gaming as a whole, TikTok has had an amazing effect on gaming communities in general. First of all, something I realized is that TikTok gives the ability for not just big content creators, but also to the players themselves to create content about the games that they play, which also helps promote them a ton. I mean, a lot of content that you see on TikTok has millions of views and are a lot of times created by people who have little to no following at all. This drastically increases the amount of eyes on games that people are genuinely interested in. To take it a step further, TikTok is also able to single-handedly keep communities alive on games that are even over a decade old. I mean, on my last video, I talked about why people still play Skate 3 14 years later after release, and a huge reason is because the game has its own community on TikTok that keeps the game popular to this day. Of course, there's also like YouTube and stuff, but I mean, TikTok is probably one of the biggest ones. Another example was Minecraft Console Legacy Edition, which I also talked about in a different video, and there's still a surprisingly big community who helps keep that version of the game alive, even though it's been discontinued. There's also this other game that got really popular on TikTok called Guns the Duel, and this shit is literally over 19 years old, yet there's still a dedicated community for it, which is huge because of TikTok. So while yeah, there has been a lot of positive things to come out of TikTok into the beautiful world of gaming, there's also been quite a bit of ugly to come from it too. The first big negative effect of TikTok on gaming is overstimulation. Now this doesn't necessarily affect the games itself, but more so the people playing them. It seems like nowadays you see a lot of people say that gaming is boring, but the question is gaming getting boring? Or are you getting boring? Nah, I'm just playing. But in some ways, yeah, I do think gaming is getting worse. But I feel like a huge part of it is simply just that players are getting too bored too easily now. I mean, I think these game developers are obviously realizing that people are losing their attention span, which is why different games are constantly trying to top the next game and it being more stimulating than the last. This could also be considered a negative effect on games catering to content creation, like I talked about earlier, but I guess that's up to debate. I mean, honestly, there is a lot of good options of games to play, maybe even too many. I mean, overstimulation in gaming is so bad now that you got videos that literally teach you how not to be addicted to overstimulating yourself while playing video games. I think most people can agree though that the #1 cause and source of overstimulation probably comes from TikTok, so I guess we can blame TikTok for that. Another issue that could be blamed on TikTok is that it seems like there's a lot of games that release and just instantly fall off the face of this earth shortly after. I think this goes hand in hand with what I just talked about because these games have to fight for their lives to be able to keep people interested in their game. I mean, if they don't got constant updates ready to be dropped after release, the game is more than likely going to die. As far as TikTok, people can only make so much content of these games if they aren't constantly dropping new stuff for them to make videos about. I think Fortnite is a good example of a game that escaped having an instant fall off, but at the cost of it being the most brain rot game in the game, just so it could keep attention. And sadly, pretty much all new games fall into this situation. The last thing I wanted to talk about is streamers themselves. Now this is an interesting one because this is something that I've actually heard y'all mention several times throughout my videos in the comments. It seems like there's been a lot of people saying that streamers are ruining gaming. Honestly, didn't really understand why people say that because in my head I feel like they actually do a lot of good for gaming, but after I looked into it I kind of understand. The first big reason that streamers negatively impact gaming is because of their huge influence. I'm pretty sure I talked about about this before in another video, but it seems like when streamers or content creators have opinions on a game, people who watch them will a lot of times just blindly agree with whatever they're saying. And TikTok comes into play because when streamers voice their opinions, these turn into an infinite amount of clips that get spread like wildfire throughout TikTok. The other big reason that people mention about streamers is because they think that games cater too much to streamers. That kind of sounds like what I mentioned as a positive earlier, but I mean, hey, I guess that's just perspective. Overall though, I think gaming is definitely at an interesting point, and I think we're very likely to see major changes within the coming years. While yeah, I do think TikTok had a negative impact on gaming, at the same time, I think a lot of the bad impact it had was kind of inevitable with or without TikTok. Either way, games are going to have to adapt and try to figure out how to maximize the amount of money they can earn. I do think there is a lot of potential though for good to happen within the gaming industry if more games do keep following down these trends, especially bigger titles. Let me know if y'all think TikTok has had a positive or a negative impact overall within modern gaming, because I'm curious to see what y'all think in the comments. But yeah, if y'all enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like and sub. Also, y'all can send me videos to react to on the second channel in my Discord. And yeah, peace y'all.